I was asked specifically about this guy, and man, I hope I should get his name right. I hope I get it correct. This is the versatile and exciting defensive lineman Tuipulotu. I think I said it right. Now this guy's fun, John, and why he's fun is because he makes plays from all over the defensive line. All over the defensive line. Can rush the passer from the inside, can rush the passer from the outside. High effort in the run game. I don't have necessarily as many questions for this guy in terms of talent. There are a couple of things, but 6'4", 290, really young. He's only 20 right now. Turns 21 by the time the season starts, early September. He's a true junior, whereas Kincaid was the redshirt senior. Played all over the defensive line. He's a Southern California guy. This guy had a monster season this year. He was all Pac-12 in 21, and then followed that up with a big year this year. You see here 116 total tackles, 46 of them in 2022. He had 21 sacks overall, 13 and a half last year, 5.5 the year prior. So a nice jump, which you like to see from a good sophomore year. 32 tackles for loss, 22 of them last year, John. 22 tackles for loss last year. 2 forced fumbles last year, 4 in total. 1 fumble recovery in his career, none last year. And then 3 passes defended last year, 5 in total. So a productive guy. He had a good year in 2021 and then an outstanding year this year. So it's not so much the one-year wonder type of status with him. Here he is against the run, shoots off the edge, makes a big play for a loss. That's against Stanford. You can see here, this is what I love about this guy, John, is depending on the game, depending on the circumstance, he plays different areas, and see that one was an interior play, I think. He can shed blocks really well. Look at that, comes off the edge. I think he came in untouched on that one. But here he is, sniffs the ball out on the perimeter and forces a fumble, beats a guy off the edge. And if you're noticing a trend here in terms of pass rushing, in terms of run blocking, you'll see on the pass rushing, it's both edge spots. It's on the inside. He just makes plays all over the field. Now, some of the things I didn't like was that, or I guess that people could find that they don't like about him, is they came in spurts against teams that were not, top caliber SEC type of teams. You're talking about your Washington States. You're talking about, a Stanford team that had a down year. You're talking about high production against teams that aren't necessarily, the hugest caliber. But when he goes up against these teams, he dominates them. And he finds ways to get to the quarterback. Sometimes he'll submarine to get either a tackle for loss on a quarterback. He'll kind of submarine a block and get under it, or he'll loop around the edge. You can see here a nice jump around the offensive tackle there. And then, another loop around there. I think that was San Jose State, if I'm not mistaken, there. And then, of course, I think this is the last clip I have here against Notre Dame. So you can see here, he can rush the passer from multiple spots. The Bengals need interior pass rush. They need some extra juice potentially on the outside too. He has good pursuit and play recognition. I said the ascending player, 5.5 sacks last year, 13.5 this year. So a really nice jump. Can be versatile, which would be really, really good for Lou Anarumo. I don't know how, in terms of that huge, quick, fast first step, I don't know how explosive he is. Of course, you've got the question of, okay, where do you play him full time, or where do you play him the most in the NFL? Do you play him on the inside and kind of hope he's that Geno Atkins kind of guy in the middle? Or do you try and maybe shed a few pounds and let him be an edge rusher? Or do you just kind of keep working him the way that SC did if you feel that you're confident enough to get production out of him at the NFL level? Both of those ways. A guy that I really, really like. He's just, if you're Lou Anarumo, you can have a ton of fun with this guy, I think. And with the Bengals needing a ton of help on interior pass rush and just extra juice getting to the quarterback, this guy provides it from a lot of different spots.
22 tackles for loss, and the next closest guy on his team had 7.5. That's not
the defense was terrible. Yeah, the defense was terrible across the board. He was the lone bright spot.
Regardless of the circumstance, he's doing it at USC. It's not like he's doing it at an FCS school. And I understand, there were concerns with Myles Garrett because he had half of his sacks in his junior year against a low level school, even though he still had 8.5 on the year and still led the team. Production is production ultimately, and this is a rare kind of production. This is Will Anderson type of production relative to his team. Now, obviously, Will Anderson's probably a better athlete, and he did it against SEC schools and everything and whatnot. But if this guy, like, if there are questions with his overall athleticism, and that's the reason why he drops, like, this type of player who produces at this age too, if he's only 20 years old,
20,
these are these are guys that stay in the NFL for a long time. Like, production like this isn't an accident at this level of competition in college football. So, like, you might be onto it, like a steal here.
What I love about the guy is, so many times in the past we talk about those hybrid edge linebacker. So there's a guy that used to play for SC. I don't know which team he was on. He was on Washington for a while. I think he was on the Chargers as well. And Cheno Wosu. He was a guy that a few years back that was a productive guy. That was that tweener, but the tweener between edge rusher and outside linebacker, right? This is a guy that's a tweener between interior defensive lineman and can play the outside. And so you either, you can, there's a little bit of, I don't know about the comparison. There's a little bit of Ed Oliver in there. This guy's bigger in terms of being able to do things inside. Maybe you kick him out. I really like this guy. I don't know. It's going to be very hard to tell where he could last. Someone could fall in love with him in the middle of the first round. He could slide to the back of the first round or second round if people don't love how he tests, if he tests poorly, that sort of thing. But I mean, you look at the tape, he's just everywhere. He's everywhere. And if he was not on that USC team, based on how poor the rest of that defense was, there is no way in hell that SC team was making it, as far as they did this year, because that defense wouldn't have been able to really stop anybody. But this guy was an absolute force with really no help around him.
Right. And I think it's going to depend on how he tests athletically, because that production with elite testing numbers, that doesn't last beyond like the first 15 picks in the draft. Now, right. There might be questions on like what his acumen is and, how technically sound he is as a pass rusher. And obviously the tweener questions come into play as well. Maybe some teams wouldn't be comfortable with whatever plan is in place because they don't really know who he is. So a player with that profile, if he happens to fall in day 2, I feel like that is the spot to take him, right? Because like Ed Oliver, he was a top 10 pick and he was billed as like the next best 3 technique, and he hasn't really developed into that. And part of his career trajectory now is because like he's looked kind of down because of when he was drafted. But if he happens to be drafted in like the 50s or 60s or whatever, because there's some questions, like the expectations with him won't be nearly as high, and I think that would be an ideal spot for him to develop and progress into a solid player.
One of the one things I did love about the USC's defense and what they did with Tuli this year is they basically found weak spots on the opposition's offensive line, and they said you're gonna play edge this week. You're gonna play right edge. You're gonna play left edge. You're gonna play interior, and we're just gonna have you exploit because you're easily our best player on defense. We're gonna exploit someone up front. That's the weak area that we think you can get in there, and he did it almost every single week. 13 and a half sacks, 22 tackles for loss this last year. Incredible, and a guy that I think would be I think Lou Anarumo would have a lot of fun with a guy like that.